So after yesterday's video kind of got cut off abruptly short, I wanted to sit down and kind of read the comments and kind of just go through not only the comments but kind of just my mental state after. Because obviously, just like everything else in life, me working through this and everyone else working through this is a process, and I wanted to articulate and kind of do some. It's not amendments. Is it amendments or addendments? I forget which. Changes essentially onto what I was saying, also mixing in a few things. So the first thing is that I recognize, and I think I even said in the video yesterday, that I recognize that this isn't like just a random act of violence because of one situation. This is more of like the straw that broke the camel's back, and after years and years and repeated offenses of this shit happening. I understand why it comes back to race, and I also have recognized, and I think that was maybe the truth. I didn't recognize at the time yesterday, is that realistically, and I've even said it before in different situations, that some people don't learn. Ironically enough, I was saying it about the COVID situation, about how, because I'm in Georgia and they reopened Georgia, one of the quickest states to reopen, and one of the first things I said was like, the sad reality is that some people won't learn their lesson about reopening the state for COVID until people start dying. It's like you had the videos online of people who weren't wearing masks and were just kind of in these giant gatherings, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I came to that realization, realized it's essentially the same thing. Like some people don't realize this is a problem until it's brought upon their doorstep. I still don't understand why your first choice of action, if you were going to riot, is to riot on your own businesses and to loot your own businesses. But that just tells me that just means there's a bunch of people out there who ain't shit and realistically, I mean that's mob mentality. And I guess that was part of my issue. I think I saw a few comments that were mentioning how fear is a good tactic, and I was like, yeah, but I feel like I don't understand. I feel like some people don't get the goal. The goal of this, I thought, was not to put black people on top, but more so equal everything out. I thought we were going for equality, and I thought, and the problem I have is that when you dictate change through fear, that is not a healthy way to move a society. If it was, and I'm just saying, it's not a healthy way to push the society forward. When your society's already based, when this country's history is already based on the fucked up atrocities that happened to different indigenous people, not only the Native Americans, but then the African Americans, and then all the other various people from different countries who ended up coming over here and being prosecuted against and all that other shit. I don't want to continue change on that same narrative, because realistically, all it breeds is more anger, hatred, and resentment that is still there from the older generations of not only white people, but from black people. There's a lot of anger and resentment through the changes that had to transpire. That's why I feel like there's a lot of anger and rage that is still coming from like the Civil War days, because essentially a bunch of white men had to kill each other over the rights of African Americans, who at the time a good chunk of them believed wasn't even worth that level. Hell, even the people who did believe they were worth it didn't give a damn and still treated them less than human in a lot of situations. I don't feel like making progress based off of fear and violence is a way of pushing things forward. And it trips me out how you always hear all of these black excellence tweets and social media posts and shit about how black people are this and we're this and we're great and we're kings and queens. We do this all the fucking time. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty of handling a situation, the only two ways we came up with was either peacefully protesting or inciting violence. Those are our two fucking choices, it feels like, which is insane because humans are way better than that in terms of adaptability and being able to think on their feet. There's no way that is it. This is the only two routes we got. We either peacefully hold up signs or we start breaking shit. Because to me, and people always ask why I prefer the peaceful route over the violence route. largely because of what violence breeds. Violence won't. Now, it may incite change, but it will be on the basis of fear and, oh no, this is coming to my doorstep. Hell, half of the people who are rioting and causing problems don't even live in these areas. These are the same motherfuckers who will go right back home and chill in their goddamn houses and relax, order shit off of Amazon, sit there and listen to Spotify. Half of these people don't have to deal with this in their own homes or even in their home gated communities or whatever the fuck. And I'm not talking about just white people. I'm talking about people in general. There are a bunch of black people who don't live in these areas who will get to just go home and chill. Which, that's not how, if you're going to make this argument and you're going to burn everything down, and then that's what I thought was funny, is that, like, that shit doesn't seem to equate to me. That, like, damn, my brain cut off for a second. Shit. That if you're trying to incite change, I want this to become an equal nation, right? I'm not concerned about having white people feel like the minority. And I feel like there's a lot of anger and resentment there that a lot of blacks do want white people to feel like they're the minority. And be like, that's how we feel. Like, oh, that was what I was going towards. When motherfuckers kept making claims about, like, how white people felt some type of way, and we're still gating white people and having the conversation. Oh. That's why you don't do videos next to a fucking dresser, because then you hit things on the side of the dresser. Oh, that's it. Good. The top fell off. Well, it's on the floor. I'll get it. I'll get it after these messages. But the point is, like, we're still sitting there gating white people out of the conversation and saying they can't say this. And we got even white people talking about, well, I'm not in the position to comment on it because I'm white. And I'm like, bro, my goal isn't to get you, to exclude you out of the conversation, because then what's the point? The point is to have you included. And I feel like a lot of black people, or at least some groups, are actively just want to shut white people out of the conversation. Say, either you need to stand with us, or you're an enemy. And I'm like, and that also that aggravates me. That's why I hated things like Black Lives Matter. I like All Lives Matter as a concept. I just don't like the way it was pushed as a narrative, that essentially All Lives Matter was pushed as a, that's why I never tweeted that shit or ever pushed that shit in my own videos. Because All Lives Matter felt like a response to, like, contradict the Black Lives Matter. And although I agree with All Lives Matter as a concept, I don't like the way it was implemented. Black Lives Matter, unfortunately, suffers the problem that a lot of groups suffer, where there's like 3 or 4 different subgroups in that group, and half of them don't even have the same fucking agenda. There's some black militant motherfuckers in those groups who actively, their only goal is essentially to push their own racism against whites, and the black community never calls it out because fuck them, that's why. And then you have the people who generally do care about activism, and that's fine. But, like, that's the reason why I never cared for that group, because that group is full of a bunch of subgroups that can't be trusted to begin with. And it always frustrated me that these same motherfuckers on Twitter and on all these social medias will sit there and hashtag the fuck out of Black Lives Matter, but you only do that once some shit happens. Like, motherfuckers want to talk about how we need to make change and we need to better our country and ourselves, but you're the same people at home chilling 90% of the time, or you're out partying, or you're out doing whatever the fuck else. You're all concerned about the state of a black America, but you only want to start becoming that kind of dude when some shit goes down. Not the other 95% of the time when you're just living your life. That's why, I think that's part of my frustration. A bunch of these people on Twitter don't give a fuck, and they won't give a fuck after this shit's over. It's easy to hop on a bandwagon and be included with this group because it's the popular or the trending thing to do. But, like, when shit goes down and after everything and the dust is settled and we go back to our normal lives, how many of these people are still going to be out here co-signing? And some people will be. I don't want to get it twisted that black people ain't shit or something. But a lot of people won't. A lot of people will just go back to their lives. And see, I've never co-signed on any of that shit because I already knew. I know how people are. That's why you got people out here bandwagoning on riots. Because it's just an excuse for a lot of people just to go steal some shit. To go break some shit. And people always wonder, oh, well, why do people have so much issue with the rioting? It's like, because the rioting doesn't fix anything. You're breeding hatred through the riots. That's the irony of it all. The riots is supposed to show that you can't take it anymore, and that you're sick of it, and this shit needs to change, and you won't listen to us when we hold the signs or when we kneel, so we're gonna fucking bring it to your doorstep. But then you just breed hatred through that, because people's lives will inevitably be ruined. It will be put on pause, which we're already on pause through the COVID. Like I said, this is like the worst time to do any of this shit, because people already are in a good emotional and physical and mental position due to all this stress, this COVID situation. People have already lost family members to a fucking disease, and then right on top of that, motherfuckers about to lose more family members over a fucking riot that didn't need to happen. You didn't need to riot. I understand people were frustrated and angry, but like, realistically, this was not the time at all for this. But, I mean, we can't go back and change the past at this point, so there's no point in dwelling on it. Which, ironically enough, I think is the issue with America in general. I think that's one of the things about the black community that frustrates me, is that we dwell on the past. And I'm not saying, and here's the kicker, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging your history and learning it. I don't have an issue with that. I'm just saying we want to carry that history with us every time we go into a conversation. Every time we want to have a discussion. Every time we want to have a debate. It always boils down to the racist system we were born on. I know that if I acknowledge it and you acknowledge it and we're having a conversation, don't bring it up to me, because we both already acknowledge it and we're not disagreeing on that point. And it frustrates me because it feels like a lot of the black community carries it on. And I think part of it's due to the older generation harboring onto that hatred and passing it down to the children. Don't do that shit. That doesn't help anybody. Teaching them that is fine, but you should still also push what happened to me did not happen to you, so don't carry hatred for some shit that you weren't involved with. Address the situation of current with your feelings of current. If you want to use that as a reference, that's fine, but don't fucking hold on to it. And that's my issue with the rioting. The rioting is literally a lot of hatred being held on to and just slammed constantly. And so you'll breed hatred through violence. I think that's the reason why I prefer the peaceful to the protest. I mean, the peaceful protest to the violence. And I prefer the peace situations to the riots. Because even though riots will cause a change in some way, shape, or form, there's always a backlash behind it. Whereas with a protest, I'm not saying negative shit can't come out of a protest, but in a protest, if you shoot a man down in a protest, guess what? In a peaceful protest, and that shit's on video, there will be no discussion of who antagonized who. If I'm standing with a sign and you shoot me, and motherfuckers look at that and said the black man agitated him, then at that point, you had your argument, because it's kind of like it's pretty much the situation that caused this. It was a video that was so blatant and like, it was so blatant and obvious, there was no way to refute it. You know, and 90% of Americans agree that was something that shouldn't have happened to that man, especially considering he had his knee on his neck for over, like, I think it was like 9 minutes or some shit. If you get shot during a protest, whose fault is it? A peaceful protest, let me rephrase. If you get shot during a protest and I'm standing here with a sign and you shoot me, who's the aggressor in that situation? And that's the mentality that should carry over moving forward. Granted, the unfortunate reality is that during both of these situations, people will get hurt, people people potentially will die, and probably will die, especially, and it's more guaranteed during a riot than of all things. Like, this shit will continue to happen. And it's a growing process, and I think as a culture, black people, we're still trying to find a way of handling it, because I don't feel like the riots, although will incite a change, I don't know if it's the change I want. I don't want fear-mongering. I don't want white people to be sitting there in the corner of like, I'm an ally. No, just be a human being. It shouldn't even be about being an ally to black people. It should be just being a good person and recognizing an injustice. That another man was killed unjustly. Fuck the race, but the race comes into it because we were taught racism. Racism is not something you're born with. You were not born hating or disliking or distrusting another race. You were taught that. And that's the fucking problem. We're being taught that by older individuals. And some people go, older? I'm like, yeah, because the older generation is the one who taught us. You think people my age who grew up without knowing racism was taught racism by like people my age. No, you were taught it by an older generation. The older generation is passing down that hatred and that anger and that level of distrust and shit. Whether it's through the actions the police may or may not take, and or the actions of your family and friends, or just other older people around you in general teach you through their actions. It's the older generation passing that shit down, and that's the thing we need to get past. But I don't want to discredit the power of riots because they have had their effect. My mother's about to come in and interrupt me, so I gotta go. Every video ends like this. It always does.